So I've been operating within the system and not attempting to get out of it in some sense, the empirical matrix, just by like making these films, for example, and stopping talking when the screen goes dark. And I don't know. I don't know whether to follow that as a rule anymore, because what is the point? And maybe all art eventually will lead a person to question uh, the conditions in which they operate. If a person is interested in that, I guess, if someone's really interested in their art, it will take them to some pretty strange conclusions, I would claim and predict. But a lot of people aren't really that interested in their art. Like Picasso, for example. I don't think he really cared about art that much. He was more interested in girls and power to some extent. And sex. And so that's what his art is about in a lot of ways. And I think that's the reason why some people who I would consider to be intelligent people have criticized him as an artist, like John Berger and Mark Rothko, because he didn't really delve very far into his art. It's really superficial, and I don't know. I don't know what Gerhard Richter is an interesting one. Well, is he? I don't know. I get the sense that, I mean, lately I thought maybe he's really a genius in some ways. Maybe his art is really deep. Uh, but I get the sense that, like Picasso, he just woke up one morning and was like, well, I have all these talents, or I'm in this place, I'm doing this, and I like to drink wine and have sex with a lot of women, and so this is what I'm going to do. And that's what they did. And I guess I have uh, considered following in those footsteps to some extent, but I just find it really hard because I find myself making things and wanting to push them farther and farther and see um, where the art takes me. Uh, and so, maybe I'll never be a Picasso or a Gerhard Richter. Uh, but I would contend that it's probably because I'm more interested in my art than they are. And, Picasso was talented, and so is Richter, maybe in a little bit of a different way. Uh, but I kind of see them both as having very similar goals. Whereas, and they didn't kill each other or themselves, so maybe they were mentally healthy in some way, as opposed to Rothko, who killed himself, uh, or Berger, who I wouldn't be surprised if he thinks about suicide. I mean, he lives a difficult life in many ways, I would think. And I mean, I guess you can say that has its rewards. Um, but I don't know. I don't see him committing suicide, but does if a person commits suicide, is that somehow in and of itself a sign that their work was in some way less valuable than other work artistically? And I could stop the video there because the screen saver came on. I could just let the computer decide the edges of this video, the limitations. I could let the empiricism define my behavior. And I have done that for the last, what is it, 7 years or so? And I don't know. It's kind of, yeah, I guess the problem is the question of whether to do that, which is entertaining in its way, because one can. It's like Tai Chi. If you let all the empiricism go do its thing, and you just respond in an empirical way, automatically, you can experience I don't know, great amounts of power and influence and things like that. Uh, but it's seems to me that there's like something beyond even the sort of Taoist philosophy of or method of Tai Chi or things like that, in which a person responds to things um, wholly, or is not going. I guess maybe this is in some people's experience of Taoism what actually happens, but neither going against or passive to uh, the world of empiricism or whatever. The world. Like Rothko said, I'm on no one's side. I don't take sides in anything. And he killed himself. Uh, so I don't know. Sometimes I think the Bible, God is uh part of the empirical. It's more like what will always be true regarding the empirical. And it has no relationship, or maybe it does, to spirituality, the real experiences of spirituality, which are beyond the word or words. I read this book by a guy named James Powell, and he was a poet or something like that, and I got it from the library. And he reminds me of my father, James, in a lot of ways as well. And he was all going, what is it? The Tao of Symbols. It was the book's title is, and he was going on about Vedic poetry and some Taoist poetry. But a lot of poetry related to Vedic poetry. And it's my opinion that those Hindu people may have a different relationship to language than other people have. But it's not necessarily beyond language. It's just like those Jungian people who think that they're somehow beyond the concept of the unconscious just because they believe in archetypes and fruity things like the collective unconscious. When in fact they are just further examples of the same process, the same thing in some way or another. Like people in Port Townsend think that they're, well, they had that Phoenix Rising place. That it's like there are a lot of Jungians think that they're kind of have this special relationship to language or something that is beyond language in some way, or this author James Powell talked about Wittgenstein, but I don't think that I think Wittgenstein was an interesting person because he talked about language, or he was interested in language games and stuff. But I think he looked at philosophy the way that I've looked at art a lot of the time, in that he looked at it as a means to truth, not just truth, but just some sort of higher experience of things. So I'm not sure that he was necessarily interested in philosophy in terms of its ability to help him perceive truth. Just as like if you made paintings, it's similar, I would say. Yeah, the idea of an artist in the search for truth. And there's ways of drawing that traditional ways of drawing, like the natural way to draw or whatever, that communicate and help a person who's participating in it enjoy a certain kind of feeling, a certain authenticity of feeling. But truth, I think it's absurd when someone says this painting is so true in this one way or another. And okay, maybe I can understand that in some way, to the extent that a painter or a critic or whatever realizes the ambition or the goal that's being made within a painting, or they imagine that there's a certain goal being made and that therefore the painting succeeds or fails in some way of meeting that goal. And by way of meeting that goal, it is a true painting. Okay, so I guess I can understand that. But I still find that to be kind of strange or absurd to think. I mean, it just seems like something someone's just making up. Uh, the problem of whether a painting has a goal of some sort, it appears to me to be arbitrary. Whereas ancient Egyptian art didn't have the idea of a painting exclusive from a form of language that could be understood. Um, maybe every painting is successful and true and representing something that other people just aren't able to appreciate. Like I saw this girl's paintings in California and San Francisco. I was staying at this hostel, and they were pretty dark. But if someone was trying to like represent the war in Bosnia or something like that, I think those paintings would be very truthful representations of that kind of feeling or that sort of anxiety of those people's lives. Whereas even art that they made themselves in that situation, they might not be able to even make something that true. It's really hard, just because someone's black doesn't mean that they understand. They're necessarily the most erudite person or the most knowledgeable person about the experience of being black, just as someone that's white doesn't necessarily know what it's like to be white, which is something interesting I never really thought about that there's probably black people that know much more than I do about what it's like to be white. Huh. Yeah. Or maybe, I don't know, I just, something I never really thought about. But it just makes, it makes sense. Yeah. I guess, I don't know. Who knows? Anyway. Truth. Truth.